Welcome back to our study in Mark's Gospel. This week I am in Mark 5, verses 21 through 43. This is one of the most famous, if not the most famous, instances where Mark uses what we have called the Markan sandwich. That is, he starts one story only to interrupt that story with a similar theme and then continue it in continue the original story after concluding that intervening story. In this one, he is talking about Jairus, who comes up to Jesus, approaches Jesus immediately after Jesus gets back from healing the demoniac. So in the story, Mark has Jesus teaching the people on one day in Mark 4, and then crossing the sea at night, and then healing the demoniac, and immediately coming back. And we're not and when he gets back to the Jewish side of the shore, uh, Jairus comes up to him. So we could reasonably assume that Jesus is doing all of this in just a matter of 2 days. When he was trying to get rest, Jesus is interrupted by uh, work, ministry, humanity, however you want to put it. And so, what Jesus wanted was rest to recharge, and what he gets is more pressing needs from the crowds. Something to ponder, just the way that Mark tells this story. Jesus does not get a break. It's just one thing after another. The only break he seems to get is when he is on the boat coming back from the healing the demoniac to this point, which might not have been a terribly long boat ride, depending on a lot of factors. But it does seem like Mark wants you to see that Jesus is being constantly confronted by new problems in this world. And it's something that we really should think about as we start to ponder who is Jesus and then who we are meant to be in this world and how we are supposed to see life. So Jesus comes back on shore, and he's immediately confronted by this man who is very rich, very prominent, very powerful. And the fact that Mark names Jairus is a little bit of a clue to us, because Mark doesn't name people. He doesn't name these characters who only show up once. The best we get is identities like Simon's mother-in-law or the man who is possessed by Legion. We don't get names for these characters who only really appear once in the story. It is possible that Jairus became a follower of Jesus and was well known in the community after Jesus' death and resurrection. That may be why Mark is giving him a name here, or allowing us to understand who he is, because not only is he prominent within this community that Jesus is ministering to, he's also possibly somebody who is prominent later that Mark's readers might actually know, or at least know by reputation. It's also possible that Jesus is here talking to Jairus, and that Jairus is the man who is in charge of the synagogue that Jesus has done so much at already. This could be the same synagogue leader from Mark 1, where this is the place where Jesus primarily teaches out of. And so this person is actually a benefactor of Jesus in some way, and therefore has some expectation that Jesus will come to his aid. He knows Jesus, and it's not just a random occurrence of a prominent man. But there's also a reality that the way Mark sets up this narrative, you have Jairus on one hand and the woman who is going to interrupt this story on the other. So as Jesus begins to walk with Jairus to his house, he is touched in the crowd by, we come to find out, an unnamed woman. So on one hand, you have Jairus, who is a wealthy man. On the other side, you have an unnamed woman. Jairus is the leader of a synagogue. He is prominent within the worshiping community. The woman has an issue that would prevent her from actually worshiping within the Jewish community. Her issue is such that had she sat down on a seat and somebody unknowingly sat down after her before the seat was cleansed, according to Leviticus, that person would be unclean and need to wash again before entering into the temple for worship. If somebody touches this woman, they are unclean and need to enter or to be purified before they enter the temple for worship. The This is an incredibly isolating situation for this woman where Jairus is prominent in the community and somebody that everybody wants to know and to invite into their lives. This woman is somebody who is very isolated. She is the exact opposite of Jairus in many, many ways. So when we see this woman enter the scene and Jesus stop to heal her, or to acknowledge her healing, really, um, we should stop and ponder the contrast between Jairus, who Jesus is going to help, and this woman who has gained healing because of her faith. Um, it is interesting that Jesus does not consciously heal her. Uh, Rather, it is her faith in touching Jesus that heals her, as if Jesus is not in sole control over the power that works in him. Rather, the power works in him and through him. And even when he is not consciously aware of what's going on, he still is able to heal people. Um, he is in close contact with this, with the power of God, because he knows when somebody is healed, but he himself is not conscious of or making a conscious decision to heal this person. It says something to us about Jesus's humanity in this situation, that he is aware that somebody has been touched and healed, but not aware of who. And the disciples understand that they see this and they go, well, you're never going to find out who touched you. Look at the crowd. Now, again, this woman who had been suffering from bleeding, we're not exactly sure what's going on. Mark is somewhat polite in this description and does not tell us exactly what the issue was, just that it had lasted for 12 years and that the woman had an issue that made her ceremonially impure. We can make guesses. None of them are inherently right or wrong, they're just guesses. And it's not terribly important to know exactly what we're dealing with here. Rather, it is the juxtaposition of the woman versus Jairus, and also the fact that Jesus is willing and able to heal her no matter what the situation is. But we do notice that this woman has intentionally touched not just Jesus, but a number of people in the crowd before her healing. This is one of those instances where we need to slow down and look at the fact that this woman made everybody in the crowd impure. And that includes Jesus. Ritually impure. Jesus would have been ritually impure and not allowed to go to worship in the temple. Now, they're nowhere near the temple, so this is not a threat to him. But he would not have, under the Jewish law, been allowed to enter the temple that day without washing. But the Bible wants us to see not the impurity that's being spread by the woman, rather the purity that is being spread by Jesus. This is a reversal of commonly held Jewish belief that if I am impure and I touch you, you become impure. Impurity is what spreads. What the gospel wants us to see is that when impurity comes into contact with Jesus, it is purity that spreads and impurity is taken away. It's a reversal of that idea. In other words, when you come to Jesus, you are made pure, not that you are made impure. And so we need to really consider that as we are reading this and seeing how this is the idea that of a new beginning, This woman who was sick, was broken in some way, was hurt in some way, was outside the community in some way, has come to Jesus and been restored. So we need to appreciate that the theology that undergirds all of this. We also need to appreciate that this woman, who would have been a nobody in society, is treated with as much or maybe even a little more deference than the man who should have been treated with deference according to society. Jesus took as much time with this woman as he does with Jairus. He maybe took a little more time. He saw her problem as an urgency the way that Jairus saw his own daughter's life. And that should speak to us that with Jesus, even the lowest people who come to him with their problems are treated the same as those who come to Jesus who have political clout, who have power in society, who have done all of the right things. Jairus would have been somebody who was regarded as righteous, and he probably was. He seems like a great guy in many, many ways. He seems to have earned his reputation. But Jesus treats this woman with the same respect, same deference that he treats the synagogue leader who would have been a pillar of the community and a role model for many. And that just should show us how Jesus views people and how we should view people. He gives her the same time, he gives her the same touch, the same healing, and begins to talk to her even though it takes away from the urgency of Jairus. Now, at this point, the servants come from Jairus' house and say, "Don't trouble Jesus anymore, your daughter has died." And here, this is always fun to me because it seems I can almost see Jesus hearing the messengers, looking at Jairus and just pushing the messenger aside, and he keeps on walking as if he knows where Jairus' house is. He goes from following Jairus to leading Jairus to his house. But it's also at this point where he starts shedding people, because Jesus doesn't want his healing to be known. Now, he has just publicly healed this woman. It seems a little counterintuitive that Jesus, who has just in front of a vast crowd publicly acknowledged that he healed this woman, well, in some respect, is now going to say to people, "You stay here, you're not allowed to see this." And to the people who know what happened, "Don't say anything." There seems to be a little bit of a disconnect there. And what it's meant to show, again, is that Jesus isn't trying to avoid people talking about his healing so much as Jesus trying to avoid this reputation of healing for hire. You notice that the two times where Jesus has really stressed don't tell anybody was with the leper and with Jairus, where people have come to him, isolated incidents where people have come to him on the path and said, "Hey, come help, can you heal me? Can you help me?" And Jesus then says, just keep this to yourself. Again, I think it's more about Jesus wants them to understand who he is, and he doesn't want the healing itself to get in the way of people understanding who he is and what he is called to do. So Jesus goes to Jairus' house and shuts everybody out except for his three closest disciples. So again, he has shut the crowds out early on. I can almost see, you can kind of see Jesus taking certain disciples and saying to other of his followers, just clog the street a little bit and don't let these guys come after me. Then he gets to the house and he tells the rest of them, "You wait out here. There's the mourners, the people who are professionally hired to cry over this girl, the family, the close friends, even Jesus' own disciples." He says, "You all wait outside. Give me some privacy here." And he walks in with Peter, James, and John and says to this woman, "Talitha kum," which is Aramaic for little girl, stand up. Why Mark includes the Aramaic here is really a mystery. We don't know why Jesus would, or why Mark would include Jesus's precise wording. At this point, he hasn't in the past, especially not untranslated into Greek. Why he wouldn't just translate it, there's no real answer. We just get the we just get the wording, and what it seems to be, if I'm making a kind of an educated guess, is that Mark is including this language so that we can see how easy Jesus deals with death. He doesn't go in with a lot of ceremony. He doesn't go in with a lot of formulaic words. Again, we need to recognize that in this culture at the time, while people understood what death was and they knew when somebody had died, there was a belief that certain people, if they got on the scene close enough to the time of death, they could restore a person because the person's spirit was still near the body. So there would have been a belief that if you said the right things and did the right things and had the right magic, you could overcome some level of death. Again, magic and medicine are very closely related in ancient world. So when I say they had the right magic, you can almost think of the right medicine. If you had the right medical technology, you can help somebody even after they have hit the point of death. Jesus, though, does not use any of that. He just walks over to this girl and treats her like she's sleeping. In other words, death and sleep are practically the same things for Jesus. Mark is trying to show us how easy it is for Jesus to say to this girl, to this young girl, get up. It's just like he's going over to her bedside when she's taking a nap and saying, nap time's over, need to get up now. And she just calmly wakes up. That would have been unheard of. That's the part that's the true kind of miracle for Mark, I think. It's not that Jesus can overcome what this girl is, the death of this girl. Maybe others could do the same thing if they had the right magic, if they had the right tools. What separates Jesus is he doesn't need any of that. He just speaks to her and she listens, much like he just spoke to the wind and the waves. He doesn't have to have the ceremony. He doesn't have to have the right language. He just speaks and death obeys. So what is this person? Who is this person that we are dealing with? Yet again, Mark is showing us that Jesus has a unique authority that we have to confront. Now, we should take a little bit of time on the fact that this girl is 12 years old and the woman who Jesus just healed had suffered for 12 years. Some people try to draw a lot of connection between those two. Frankly, that's kind of tough. There's not a lot connecting other than the common number of 12. But it might also be that this is significant just because 12 is a number of fullness, of completion. The woman had been sick for 12 years, and so she had completed her illness. The girl was 12 years old. She had completed her childhood. That could be all it is. There's a lot of guesses out there, but I don't see a strong connection between the girl and the woman other than they are both female and they have both been, they both have the number 12 associated with them. That's just probably more of a framing thing than any real significance. But again, Mark tells us that Jesus says, don't tell anybody, even though there are people literally outside the door who know exactly what happened. And this is going to spread like wildfire because there's no keeping this secret. People have already spread that this child is dead and she's going to be alive. And so questions are going to be asked and things are going to be said. I think it's more about, like I said earlier, it's more about Jesus wanting to say to them, hey, listen, I don't want to be known as this healer. My healing has a greater purpose than just bringing back your child. As great as that is, there's more to it than that. And you need to understand that and not just spread the idea that I just come around and heal people like any common healer would. You need to give me a little more credit. You need to talk a little bit differently about this situation because it's important. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it today. If this helped you, please let me know. I'd love to hear your questions, your comments, what this passage says to you, and how you've interacted with it. So please let me know in the comments or somewhere else that how this is all impacting you. And I look forward to seeing you again. God bless.